Rachel Moore stood behind the marble reception desk of Weston and Knox Towers, absent-mindedly twirling a pen while waiting for her shift to end. Outside, rain slammed against the glass like the city was trying to scream. The office had long emptied. Only the ticking of a wall clock and distant thunder kept her company. Then the phone rang, sharply, insistently, almost like a warning. She stared at it, debating whether to answer. It wasn't her job anymore. She'd been told only to forward calls after hours. But the ringing wouldn't stop. On the seventh ring, she sighed and picked up. "Good evening, Weston and Knox," she said. Her voice calm despite her rising nerves. A man's voice responded in Russian. Rachel's heart skipped. Without hesitation, she answered fluently. "Yes, Mr. Antonov, I understand. Mr. Blake is unavailable. May I assist you?" The man paused. "You speak Russian?" he asked. Rachel replied, "Yes, fluently. Go ahead." She scribbled notes. As the man explained an urgent investment matter tied to an energy deal in Eastern Europe, she nodded as if he could see her, her voice firm and steady. She didn't know that Jonathan Blake, CEO of Weston and Knox, was standing 20 feet away in the hallway, frozen. He'd returned late to grab a forgotten file. What stopped him wasn't the call. It was Rachel's voice, fluent, poised, confident. Not the Rachel he passed every morning with a distracted "hi." This Rachel sounded like someone else entirely. He stepped closer, just enough to hear every word. She was navigating terms he barely understood in English, talking about convertible notes, minority protection clauses, cross-border tax shelters. Jonathan, who spoke decent Russian himself, recognized her fluency was miles beyond his. This wasn't self-taught. This was immersion, mastery, maybe even native level. Rachel wrapped up the call with a graceful goodbye, then hung up and exhaled. She turned and saw Jonathan. Her eyes widened. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she stammered, "Mr. Blake, I didn't know you were still here." Jonathan didn't reply immediately. He was staring at her like she'd grown wings. "You speak Russian?" he asked finally, voice low. "Yes, sir. Sorry. The call kept ringing and I thought—" "No," he interrupted. "That wasn't basic conversation. You just handled a high-stakes deal like a senior executive." Rachel flushed. "I used to study languages. It's part of my past." She reached for her notepad, nervous. Jonathan stepped forward, picked up the notepad before she could. "Who was he?" "Ivan Antonov. He said he's been trying to reach you. It's about a $60 million energy project in Ukraine. He seemed disappointed not to find you, but asked to be called back urgently." Jonathan blinked. "$60 million?" He paced slowly, processing. "I've been chasing Antonov for weeks. He never replied. And now one call with you." Rachel said nothing, unsure if she was in trouble or about to be offered a strange promotion. Jonathan looked at her again, this time with different eyes. "Rachel, how long have you worked here?" 14 months, she said, voice soft. "And you never mentioned your language skills." "Why would I? I'm the receptionist." Jonathan frowned. "Where did you learn Russian?" "I majored in Slavic linguistics, lived in Minsk for 2 years. I speak 4 more languages." Her voice was matter-of-fact, tinged with sadness. "You're overqualified by a mile." "Tell that to every interviewer who never looked past my name." Jonathan tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Rachel smiled bitterly. "Rachel Moore doesn't scream international analyst to most companies. They see a pretty receptionist. Or worse, nothing at all." Silence stretched between them. The storm outside quieted, but tension buzzed in the room. Jonathan finally asked, "What if I told you Antonov wants to meet tomorrow?" Rachel looked up. "Meet?" "He thinks you're part of my executive team. He asked for you by name." Her mouth parted slightly. Jonathan stepped closer. "I want you there, as my interpreter, as my partner in this negotiation." "Me?" Rachel's voice cracked. I don't even own a blazer, he chuckled. Then we'll get one. Rachel, you just opened a door I didn't even know existed. Help me walk through it. She hesitated. In that moment, her heartbeat was the only thing she could hear. The receptionist in her wanted to decline, but the woman who'd once dreamed of shaping global deals, the one she buried, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." Jonathan smiled. "Good. Tomorrow, we change everything." Rachel lay awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling fan in her tiny studio apartment in Queens. Her mind raced. Words like meeting, interpreter, $60 million, and Jonathan Blake kept colliding in her head. She replayed the conversation over and over, wondering if it had even been real. At some point, she drifted into a restless sleep. By morning, she'd changed outfits 5 times before settling on a plain black dress she'd once worn to a funeral. It was all she had that felt remotely professional. As she checked her reflection one last time, her phone buzzed. A message from Jonathan. "Drivers downstairs. We're stopping at 5th Avenue first. You'll need something that says executive, my treat." Her heart pounded. She didn't know whether to feel grateful, offended, or terrified. She stepped into the black car waiting for her, and the driver opened the door like she was royalty. "Miss Moore," he said with a polite nod, "Mr. Blake asked that you join him at Valen and Row." She blinked. That was one of the most expensive boutiques in Manhattan. Jonathan greeted her with a coffee in one hand and a shopping bag in the other. "Good morning. You look understated," he said, trying to be kind. She gave him a look. "That's polite for underwhelming, right?" He grinned. "Let's fix that." Inside the boutique, everything smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Rachel walked hesitantly past suits and dresses that cost more than her rent. "This is insane," she muttered. "You know that, right?" Jonathan shrugged. "This isn't a handout, it's an investment. I need you looking like the woman Antonov thinks you are." She scanned the racks. "I'm not that woman." "Not yet," he replied. A stylist approached, and soon Rachel was trying on navy suits, silk blouses, heels higher than she'd ever worn. Jonathan gave feedback without being invasive. "This one makes you look like you own the room." She turned, saw herself in the mirror, and didn't recognize the woman looking back. Strong, poised, possible. They left the store with bags in hand. "We've got 3 hours before the meeting," Jonathan said. "Come to the office, we'll go over the deal." In the car, Rachel glanced at him. "Why are you doing this?" He paused. "Because you reminded me that talent hides in places. We don't bother to look." She stayed quiet, but his words struck something deep. At the office, they sat in a glass conference room with views of the skyline. Jonathan laid out the terms of the Antonov deal: energy distribution rights, equity, stakes, diplomatic risk. Rachel listened absorbed, translated some legal jargon aloud in Russian just to practice. "Where did you learn this stuff?" he asked. "I did a postgrad in international policy before life happened." "Life?" She hesitated. "My father died. I dropped out, started working. I got stuck in survival mode. One day, the dream just faded." Jonathan looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. The moment stretched. Then he handed her a tablet. "Here's the Russian version of the MOU. I need you to review it. Make sure it reads as respectful, assertive, and clear." Rachel took it with trembling hands. "You trust me with this?" "I trust what I saw yesterday. Don't make me regret it." The meeting was scheduled for 4 p.m. sharp at a private suite in the Four Seasons. As they arrived, Rachel's palms began to sweat. "Breathe," Jonathan whispered as they stepped into the elevator. "You've got this." The suite was minimalist and opulent. Antonov stood by the window, flanked by 2 associates. "Mr. Blake," Antonov said in accented English. Then in Russian, "And Miss Moore, I'm very pleased you came." Rachel responded in fluent Russian, thanking him for the opportunity. Antonov smiled slightly. "I must say I was skeptical, but your voice yesterday reminded me of Moscow winters. Sharp, unexpected." They sat. Jonathan led the conversation, but Rachel interpreted where nuance was needed, softening phrases that could offend, reinforcing statements that sounded unsure. At one point, Antonov leaned forward and asked Rachel directly, "Do you believe in this project?" Rachel didn't hesitate. "Yes. If done right, it could power thousands and unite markets." Antonov nodded. "Good, because I don't sign with people who only speak numbers. I sign with those who speak substance." As the meeting ended, he turned to Jonathan. "She stays on, non-negotiable." Jonathan smiled. "Wouldn't dream of it." Rachel felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Back in the car, silence lingered until Jonathan finally said, "You were incredible." She turned to him, unsure whether to deflect or accept the praise. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice soft. Then he added, "This is just the beginning." Rachel looked out at the city as dusk fell. "I hope so," she whispered. The morning after the Antonov meeting, Rachel sat at her desk, now relocated to the 27th floor near the executive suites. Everything around her was glass, transparent, modern, exposed. The irony wasn't lost on her. She felt more visible than ever, yet somehow even more scrutinized. People who had ignored her for months now nodded awkward hellos, trying to place her. In the boardroom next door, Jonathan briefed the legal team. Rachel could hear muffled fragments. Clause 6, non-disclosure, offshore adjustment. She wanted to be in that room, not as an assistant, as an equal. When the meeting ended, Jonathan emerged with tired eyes, but a small smile. "Rachel, you free for lunch?" She blinked. "Sure." They walked to a nearby bistro. No suits, no boardroom tension, just two people under grey skies. "I've been thinking," Jonathan began. "You're wasted behind a desk." She raised an eyebrow. "Thanks, I think." He chuckled. "You know what I mean. I want to bring you on as a cultural strategist, temporary for now." Rachel stopped walking. "Strategist? You'd work with me directly. Languages, market briefings, cultural insight. I can't do these international deals blind anymore." Her breath caught. "But I'm not a consultant. I don't have credentials, recent ones anyway." Jonathan shook his head. "What you did yesterday doesn't need credentials. It needs courage." She looked away, processing. "What's the catch?" "No catch," he said, then paused. "But you'd have to travel. A lot. Antonov wants us in Prague next week." Rachel nodded slowly. "Then I need to talk to someone first." That night, she visited her mother's apartment in Jackson Heights, a cluttered space, rich in warmth and spices. Her mom served rice and beans with a side of unsolicited advice. "Prague? You think they won't fire you after they get what they want?" Rachel exhaled. "This isn't like the others, Mom." Her mom's eyes softened. "You've always been the smartest person in every room. Maybe now the rooms are catching up." Back in her own apartment, Rachel stared at the ceiling again, not out of fear this time, but something stranger. Possibility. She started listing all the places she'd once dreamed of working. Geneva, Sao Paulo, Johannesburg. Was it finally her time? Her phone buzzed. A message from Jonathan. "Booked for Prague. Hope you like cold air and hot strategy." The flight to Prague was quiet. Rachel reviewed documents while Jonathan slept, his head tilted slightly, face softer than usual. She noticed the crease between his brows, even in rest. Stress was a constant companion to men like him. She wondered if he ever truly relaxed. As the plane descended, snow flurried against the windows. Their hotel was a restored palace, gold accents, frescoed ceilings, and heavy silence. The first meeting was with Czech energy officials who distrusted outsiders. Rachel noticed the subtle tension, the too polite smiles, the way English didn't quite carry the emotion required. She whispered to Jonathan before the next question, "Offer a metaphor about stability." He did. They responded. Something shifted. Afterward, Jonathan turned to her. "That tip about the metaphor, how did you know?" "Czech culture values, layered meaning. Straight talk feels aggressive." Jonathan blinked. "You're a cultural codebreaker." She smiled. "I just listen harder than most." He smiled back, longer than he should have. That night they had dinner in a quiet corner of the hotel. Jonathan ordered in flawless French. Rachel teased him in Czech. They laughed, really laughed, for the first time since they met. Then silence. The kind of silence that hums, that asks questions without needing words. "Can I ask you something?" he said, voice low. "Of course." "Why did you give up?" She looked away. "Because every time I tried, the door closed. I got tired of proving myself just to be seen." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for all the times people like me didn't look closer." She met his eyes. "You're looking now." Neither of them said anything after that, but the air changed. Not romantic, not yet. Something deeper. Recognition. Two people from different worlds realizing they might be walking toward the same. Oh, no. When Rachel returned to her room, she didn't feel invisible. For the first time in years, she felt seen and perhaps understood. Back in New York, the skyline seemed colder, sharper. Rachel stepped into the Weston and Knox headquarters with her new badge, Cultural Strategy Associate. The title felt surreal. She tried not to smile too much in the elevator. Around her, executives eyed her with curiosity that bordered on suspicion. A receptionist turned strategist. That kind of leap wasn't common. Jonathan met her on the 27th floor, tossing a thin folder on her desk. "We're being summoned," he said. "By whom?" she asked, flipping it open. "Board of Directors. They want to know who the unknown linguist is that salvaged the Antonov deal and why she's on payroll." Rachel stiffened. "So I'm a problem now?" "Not to me," Jonathan said, "but to people who hate disruption?" "Maybe." She followed him to the 30th floor where the board convened in a room that smelled of aged leather and power. The chairman, Sterling Hall, barely looked at her. "Miss Moore," he said, "you're quite the anomaly." Rachel kept her posture neutral, only if competence is rare. A few board members exchanged glances. Sterling didn't flinch. "Mr. Blake tells us you were integral to Antonov's cooperation. What's your formal background?" "BA in linguistics, minor in political theory, graduate coursework in Slavic studies. I left before completion due to a family loss." Sterling's fingers tapped the table. "And since then? Reception work, translation, survival." She met his gaze. "Now I'm applying what I studied to build trust where others see only transactions." A pause, then a hum of faint approval from a woman on the left. "Impressive," she said, "if unorthodox." After the meeting, Jonathan led her out, tension thick between his shoulders. "You handled that like a pro," he said. Rachel smiled, but her insides were knotted. "Did I just pass some secret test?" "No, but you scared a few of them. That's not nothing." She couldn't tell if that was a good thing. Later that week, Rachel sat alone in her new corner office, small but hers. She stared at the dry erase board filled with notes: Prague success, Middle East initiative pending, new outreach in Brazil. Her thoughts, though, wandered. Not to work, but to the look Jonathan had given her before that board meeting. Admiration. Something more? Their next trip was to Dubai. Jonathan briefed her in the car. Ahmed Rashid, real estate mogul, conservative, Speaks English but prefers Arabic when discussing legacy. Rachel nodded. Leave the first 10 minutes to me. Jonathan laughed. You're enjoying this, aren't you? You mean being allowed to matter? A little. In the meeting room, Rachel wore a tailored navy blazer, her hair pinned back. Ahmed arrived in a pristine white thobe, flanked by aides. He barely looked at Jonathan. And this is Rachel Moore, she said in Arabic. I've read your work on heritage integration. Brilliant. Ahmed's eyebrow rose. Someone reads the white papers. Someone respects the foundation. Beneath the skyline, she replied. A slow smile spread across Ahmed's face. He motioned for them to sit. For the next hour, Rachel guided the discussion with measured diplomacy, shifting from Arabic to English to French when a Parisian investor joined by video call. Afterwards, in the car, Jonathan was silent for a long moment. You ran that meeting. Rachel shrugged. I guided it. You closed it. He looked at her. You realize they don't want me without you now. She met his eyes. And you okay with that? I've never been more okay with anything. That night he knocked on her hotel door. No pretense, no agenda, just quiet intensity. Can I come in? She nodded. Something wrong? He stepped inside, unsure how to say what was building inside him. Rachel, I think we're at a tipping point. Professionally? Not only. The air changed. She sat on the bed's edge, hands folded. Say what you're trying to say. Jonathan sat beside her, tension etched into his face. You've changed everything. The way I see people, business, myself, and I don't know what to do with that, Rachel whispered. Maybe just let it happen. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. They sat there, surrounded by silence and moonlight streaming through the window, two people no longer afraid of what they saw in each other. Not quite a beginning, but no longer just business. Back in New York, the mood in the office had shifted. Whispers followed Rachel through the halls. Some nodded respectfully now, others turned away too quickly, their smiles strained. It was the kind of attention that had nothing to do with celebration, and everything to do with disruption. She wasn't just an exception, she was a threat to the status quo. Jonathan noticed it too. In their morning briefing, he leaned back in his chair and said, They're circling. Rachel didn't look up from her notes. Let them. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You've changed the landscape faster than they can redraw it. That scares them. She finally looked up. Do I scare you? He hesitated. Not the way they mean. There was something else in his voice, not fear, caution. That night Rachel received an anonymous message. No name, just a sentence. Be careful whose tables you're sitting at. Some aren't meant for you. Her hands trembled, not from fear but anger, the kind that makes you remember everything you've ever been denied. She debated telling Jonathan. Instead, she showed the message to the only other person she trusted, Leah, a paralegal from the 6th floor. This place hates unpredictability, Leah said. You make them feel like their titles aren't bulletproof. Rachel sipped her coffee slowly. I've never been bulletproof, but I'm still here. The next day, Sterling Hall requested a clarifying session about Rachel's role. Jonathan accompanied her, but Rachel insisted on speaking for herself. I wasn't hired to be invisible, she said, and I didn't ask to be exceptional. I just refused to be irrelevant. Sterling leaned back. You're passionate. But passion doesn't always translate to permanence. Rachel tilted her head. But it always precedes change. The meeting ended with polite nods and veiled threats. On the elevator ride down, Jonathan was quiet. They want me to sideline. You play, he finally said. Rachel didn't flinch. Will you? No, but they'll make me pay for that. Later that evening, Jonathan showed up at Rachel's apartment unannounced. He looked tired. "I needed to see something real," he said. She let him in. "What happened?" He sank onto her couch. "I spent the day with people who smiled through clenched teeth. I needed someone who doesn't lie with their eyes." Rachel sat beside him, close but not touching. "You're unraveling." "A little," he admitted, "but only because I'm realizing I've been holding together something broken for too long." She nodded slowly. "You've been protecting a version of this company that stopped serving people like me a long time ago." Silence wrapped around them. Then he said, "Do you regret it, stepping into all this?" She exhaled. "I regret every year I stayed small because I thought the room wouldn't accept me." He looked at her then, really looked. "What if I told you I'm not just protecting you anymore? I'm standing with you." Rachel turned toward him. "Then you need to decide how far you're willing to go. Because standing with me isn't just defying protocol, it's declaring war on comfort." Jonathan smiled faintly. "Then let's be uncomfortable together." She reached for his hand again, but this time it wasn't tentative. It was certain. They stayed there, shoulder to shoulder, watching the city lights flicker like blinking stars across a steel sky. Two architects of something neither could name yet, but both believed in. Not lovers, not colleagues, not yet, but something unbreakable had begun. The air in Abu Dhabi was thick with sun and silence. Rachel stepped off the plane and inhaled deeply, the heat wrapping around her like a warning. It was her first time in the Middle East. The architecture was sleek, but ancient culture pulsed beneath the steel. Jonathan walked beside her, quiet and unreadable. They were meeting with the Al Masari Consortium, a group of elite investors, rooted in tradition and wary of outsiders. Jonathan briefed her in the car. "They respect strength but not arrogance. Deference matters. They'll test you." Rachel's expression didn't waver. "Let them." Still, her heart pounded. Inside the marble hall of the Al Masari offices, everything gleamed. Gold, polished stone, stillness. They were led to a private room where 5 men waited. The eldest, Sheikh Zahir, gestured for them to sit. "We have heard of the American woman who speaks the language of bridges," he said in Arabic. Rachel bowed her head. "And I've heard of the men who never cross one they didn't build themselves." A pause. Then, laughter. The sheikh smiled. A sharp tongue. Dangerous in the wrong hands, valuable in the right ones. For the next 2 hours, Rachel navigated a maze of subtext and symbolism. Her Arabic was fluent, but it wasn't just the language. It was how she listened, how she mirrored without mimicking, how she made them feel understood without giving anything away. Afterward, as they exited into the shimmering heat, Jonathan looked at her sideways. "You just danced with royalty." Rachel didn't smile. "We're not done yet." That night, in her hotel suite, she called her mother. "I feel like I'm walking a tightrope. Every word matters more than the last." Her mother's voice was calm. "That means you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Meanwhile, back in New York, the board had begun internal audits. Rachel's name was mentioned more than Jonathan's. Some wanted to spin her as a diversity hire gone rogue. Others whispered that she was the real brain behind recent success. Sterling Hall, ever strategic, waited to see if she'd implode or rise. On the final day of negotiations, Sheikh Zahir invited Rachel to a private lunch. No aides, no Jonathan, just tradition and intention. Over roasted lamb and mint tea, he asked, "What do you want, Miss Moore?" She hesitated. "To build a world where language isn't a barrier to belonging." "And how do you plan to do that?" "By earning trust in every tongue I speak." The sheikh studied her. "You've learned more than words. You've learned to listen between them." When she returned to the hotel, Jonathan was pacing. "You had a private lunch with Zahir?" "He wanted to know what I want." Jonathan paused. And I told him the truth, and I think he believed it. That night, they stood on the rooftop terrace of the hotel, overlooking the glowing domes of the mosque below. "I'm tired," Rachel whispered. "Tired of proving I belong in rooms I've already opened." Jonathan touched her hand gently. "Then maybe it's time you stop entering rooms and start building your own." Their eyes met. It was no longer just partnership, no longer just admiration. There was something blooming that neither wanted to name, not yet, but it lived in the quiet between them, in the way their hands lingered, in the silence that didn't need filling. When they returned to New York, contract signed, Rachel received an email with the subject line, "Proposal for Expansion, Asia Division." She opened it slowly. Inside, an offer from a Korean conglomerate seeking cultural integration support. A new country, a new challenge, a new test of everything she had become. Rachel sat by the floor-to-ceiling window in her apartment, the offer from Seoul open on her laptop. She'd read it 4 times, each line shimmering with possibility. A 6-month consulting contract, full autonomy, first-class travel, and a leadership role in one of Asia's fastest-growing corporate expansions. And yet, her chest ached. Jonathan hadn't said much since they landed. He was quiet during debriefs, formal in meetings, and distant in tone. They were back to being colleagues, almost strangers in rhythm. Rachel wondered if Abu Dhabi had drawn them closer, or scared them apart. She didn't want to assume, she wanted to ask. But how do you ask a question that might break what hasn't even begun? Her phone buzzed. A message from Jonathan. "You free tonight? Need to talk." Her fingers hovered before she typed back, "My place at 8. When he arrived, he looked undone, not unkempt, but tired in a way that felt emotional. He handed her a bottle of wine. "I don't know if this is celebratory or conciliatory." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Rachel spoke. "I got an offer, Seoul." Jonathan nodded slowly. "I figured. Word travels faster than memos." She sipped her wine. "It's everything I ever wanted. Respect, autonomy, scale." He leaned forward. "Then why do you look like it's a death sentence?" She swallowed. "Because I don't want to leave something else behind." A pause. Someone else. He looked at her, his mask slipping. "Rachel, I've been trying to protect what we're building, and somewhere along the way, I started protecting how I feel about you too." Her breath caught. "Then why have you been pulling away?" she asked softly. "Because I don't want this, us, to be something you sacrifice." "And what if it's something I choose?" Jonathan looked down. "That terrifies me. You deserve to rise without looking back, without tether." She shook her head. "But what if you're not a tether? What if you're the gravity that keeps me steady?" Silence hung between them, electric and fragile. He moved closer. "Rachel, if you go, I'll support you. If you stay, I'll never stop trying to earn that." "I'm not asking you to catch me," she said. "Just walk with me." "Then walk with me to Seoul." She blinked. "What?" "Let's go together. I can run part of the business remotely. We build something new there. Test it. Us, the model, everything." Rachel's heart thundered. "You do that? You change my mind. Now let me change your world." That night, under the city lights, they sat on her fire escape and talked until dawn. About love that didn't demand sacrifice. About careers that could bend instead. Of break. About soul. About risk. And about what it meant to finally have something to lose, and someone worth losing it for. The next day, Rachel accepted the Seoul offer with a condition. Jonathan Blake would join as business development consultant. A joint project. A partnership in every sense. Sterling Hall raised an eyebrow in the next board meeting. "2 of our rising stars heading to Korea. This smells like a scandal or a startup." Jonathan smiled coolly. We're building something that outlives titles." Rachel added, "and maybe teaches this place how to see before it's too late." They boarded the flight to Seoul that Friday. As the plane climbed, Rachel reached for Jonathan's hand. "We're really doing this," she said. "No turning back." He looked at her, eyes soft. "I wasn't planning to." The first morning in Seoul hit like a wave, dense with unfamiliar sounds, neon lights blinking even before sunrise, and the polite precision of a culture that thrived on discipline. Rachel adjusted quickly, her mind already mapping social etiquette, language dynamics, and unspoken hierarchies. Jonathan, however, was visibly uneasy. Their office was a minimalist cube on the 32nd floor of a glass skyscraper in Gangnam. It overlooked the Han River, where the sunrise painted water in gold. They'd been given temporary staff, mostly bilingual, all observant. Rachel noticed how they deferred to Jonathan, then tilted toward her when nuance was needed. "Respect isn't automatic here," she told him over their first lunch of bibimbap and barley tea. "It's earned through subtlety, through care with words." Jonathan chewed slowly. "So I should stop asking direct questions," she smiled. "You should start asking the right ones." They spent the next week preparing for their first client presentation, a consumer tech giant wanting to expand into Middle Eastern markets. Rachel constructed a framework for intercultural branding. Jonathan focused on fiscal strategy. Their synergy returned. It wasn't just professional, it pulsed with quiet tension neither acknowledged aloud. The night before the pitch, Rachel stood on their apartment balcony, Seoul's skyline blinking like a digital heartbeat. Jonathan joined her, handing her hot tea. "You ready?" he asked. She nodded. "But I'm scared too. Of failing. Of becoming what I always wanted and finding it's still not enough." He didn't respond at first. Then, "What if you stop chasing enough and start living inside of it?" She looked at him. "And what if that means I finally let someone in?" Jonathan's voice dropped. "Then I'd be honored to be let in." The presentation the next day was flawless. Rachel opened in Korean, just a greeting, but enough to win respectful smiles. She then shifted into Arabic to demonstrate market sensitivity. Jonathan followed with investment models and competitive data. The clients left the room both stunned and sold. Rachel and Jonathan stood in silence after. "Did we just pull that off?" he asked. "We did," she said. "Together." He leaned against the table, watching her. "You were extraordinary. So were you." A beat. "You always are, when you stop pretending you're not." That night, she kissed him, not out of impulse, but intention. They didn't talk about it the next morning. They didn't need to. But the unspoken between them had changed. Their work became sharper. Their rhythm, seamless, words spread. A Western duo breaking cultural barriers with precision and respect. Seoul started paying attention, but with attention came scrutiny. Rumors stirred about favoritism, about emotional entanglement clouding professional boundaries. Rachel overheard a conversation in Korean at a cafe, two analysts speculating if she had earned her role or simply charmed her way into it. The sting was deep, old wounds reopening in a new language. That evening, she confronted Jonathan. "Are we risking everything for something we still don't name?" He didn't hesitate. "If we're building it, we should name it." She exhaled. "Then say it." He walked toward her. "Rachel, I'm in love with you. Not because of what you can do, but because of who you are when no one's watching." Tears welled up. "You don't get to love only the parts of me that win meetings. I don't. I love the woman who doubts, who dreams, who fights to be seen even when the room won't look up." She nodded, voice small. "Then let's keep building, but this time together, out loud." They agreed to formalize their partnership as co-founders of a new consultancy, independent from Weston and Knox, soul, would be the first test. They'd prove that integrity and emotion could coexist with power, that love didn't weaken strategy, but clarified it. The launch party for their new venture, Moore and Blake Global Strategy, was held in a converted warehouse along the Han River. Lanterns floated from the ceiling, and the air buzzed with multiple languages: Korean, English, Arabic, Mandarin. Rachel stood near the entrance, watching guests stream in, a flute of champagne trembling in her hand. Jonathan arrived late as usual, tie loosened, smile sharp. "Sorry, the printer botched the last batch of business cards. Apparently, we're now Moore and Bloke Consulting." Rachel laughed, and for a moment the tension dissolved. Then she leaned closer. "Are we really ready for this?" "We're already in it." Their speech was brief. Rachel opened in Korean, thanking their local partners. Jonathan followed in English, affirming their mission to bridge cultural intelligence with market expansion. When they concluded, the room erupted in applause, not thunderous, but respectful. The kind of approval you earn, not expect. After the event, they walked along the river, heels in hand, jackets over shoulders. "It's wild," Jonathan said. "Just a year ago, I was a corporate drone ignoring the smartest person in the building. And I was folding flyers at a reception desk, dreaming in 6 languages. Now we own a company." Rachel hesitated. "And we're something else too." Jonathan looked at her. "Say it." "We're vulnerable. And I think I'm scared of how much of myself I've given to this, to you." He stepped in front of her. "I'm scared too, not of the company, not of the future, just of hurting you if this balance breaks." Their first few months as business partners were seamless. Publicly, they signed 2 major clients, in Dubai and Singapore. Rachel gave a keynote in Tokyo. Jonathan secured a speaking spot in Berlin. They were growing, fast, too fast, and cracks, though small, began to form. At home, schedules blurred. Late-night meetings bled into early morning silences. Conversations about strategy replaced conversations about each other. One night, Rachel found herself on the couch at 3 a.m. reviewing a proposal alone. Jonathan walked in, saw her illuminated by laptop glow. "Do you even sleep anymore?" She looked up. "Do you even notice?" The silence that followed was brutal. He sat beside her. "We built this to escape the machine. Now we've become it." She shut the laptop. "We need boundaries, or we'll destroy everything that made this worth building." They agreed on a rule. 1 weekend a month. No laptops, no meetings, just us. The first time they tried it, it was awkward. Rachel kept reaching for her phone. Jonathan couldn't stop, thinking about a pending contract. But by the second day, they'd remembered who they were without deadlines, just 2 people who made each other laugh, who dreamed big and held each other even bigger. They began assigning culture specialists for each client, decentralizing their roles. Rachel trained 3 new hires herself, one from Morocco, one from Brazil, and one from Seoul. She watched them find their rhythm, and for the first time saw herself in someone else's ambition. Jonathan took on mentoring young entrepreneurs in underfunded regions. "If I can give someone a shortcut I never had," he told Rachel one night, "maybe I can leave something better behind than just a company." She looked at him then, heart full. "You already have. You left behind who you used to be." One evening, while reviewing data from their South American expansion, Rachel paused and stared at a map on the wall. "Do you ever feel like we're building something too big to carry?" Jonathan walked up behind her. "We're not carrying it alone anymore. That was always the dream." They were no longer just building bridges between cultures. They were becoming the foundation beneath them. And though the next challenges loomed, more markets, higher stakes, they finally knew that growth didn't have to mean distance, not between people, not between partners. The envelope came on a Monday morning, heavy, cream-colored, with a red seal that bore the unmistakable logo of TED Global. Rachel opened it slowly, heart pounding. The letter was short. We invite Rachel Moore to be a featured speaker at TED Vancouver. Topic: language, identity, and influence in global leadership. She stared at it for a long time, then walked into Jonathan's office. Got invited to speak at TED. He looked up from his laptop, blinked. Are you serious? She held the letter out. Completely. He stood slowly. Rachel, this is huge. She smiled, nervous. It's terrifying. They sat, in silence for a while, both absorbing the weight of it. Then Jonathan said, You've earned this, every moment, every setback, every room you entered where no one expected your voice to matter. You built this. Rachel nodded. Then why? Does it feel like I'm stepping onto a stage I don't belong to? He reached for her hand. Because you still carry every door that was closed on you. But this isn't about proving anything anymore. This is about telling the truth to people who forgot how to hear it. She smiled, barely. Will you come with me? Always. As she began drafting her talk, Rachel wrestled with how much to reveal. Should she mention the years at the reception desk, the loneliness, the anonymous message that warned her she didn't belong, or the moments when even success felt like borrowed time? Jonathan encouraged honesty. Speak from the scar, not the wound, he told her. They traveled to Vancouver a week before the conference to settle in and prepare. The city was serene, cool, and strangely quiet compared to Seoul's buzz. One night, while watching seaplanes land over dinner, Jonathan said, when you walk out on that stage, just remember, your voice already changed one company, one culture, one man. Now you'll change thousands. Rachel looked at him. You're not scared I'll outgrow us? Jonathan shook his head. You already have, and I've never been more in love. The words hung there. Not a declaration, an affirmation. She reached across the table. Then I hope I never stop growing. The day of the talk arrived with clear skies and nerves. Rachel stood backstage, microphone clipped, palms damp. Jonathan squeezed her hand. You don't have to impress anyone. Just tell the truth. She nodded and stepped onto the red circle. The audience applauded politely. Then, silence. Rachel took a breath. 3 years ago, I answered a phone that wasn't meant for me. I was a receptionist, and I was fluent in 6 languages, but no one had ever asked me about any of them. A few faces leaned forward. I wasn't seen as a strategist or a leader. I was seen as support, until one moment changed everything. One voice, mine, unexpectedly proved essential, and I realized I had been essential all along. The room held still. Rachel continued, now steady. I'm not here because I'm special. I'm here because I decided not to disappear, because I translated myself, my pain, my ambition, my silence, into action. By the time she finished, the room was standing. Jonathan was already crying. After the talk, she was swarmed by academics, diplomats, CEOs. One woman from Beirut hugged her and whispered, I speak 5 languages, but you gave me a voice. Rachel cried too, quietly. Then, over Jonathan's shoulder, she saw someone she didn't expect. Sterling Hall. He approached slowly. Miss Moore, he said, that were formidable. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Didn't think you were the TED type. He smiled thinly. Let's just say I'm revising some assumptions. He handed her a card. If you ever decide to return, Weston and Knox would welcome you under any title you choose. She looked at the card, then at Jonathan, then back at Sterling. I already built what I needed, and I brought everyone with me. Sterling nodded, accepting the answer without protest. As he walked away, Jonathan whispered, You didn't just reclaim your story, you rewrote it. Returning from Vancouver felt like re-entering a different world. The Seoul office buzzed with congratulations, flowers, and emails from Fortune 500 companies. Rachel had gone viral. Clips of her TED Talk circled the globe, translated, subtitled, analyzed, but visibility came with pressure. Everyone now expected brilliance on demand. She spent hours trying to answer every request. Interviews, consulting, inquiries, panel invitations. One night she collapsed on the floor of her apartment, laptop still glowing beside her. Jonathan found her there, eyes closed, breathing heavy. "You're burning out," he said, kneeling beside her. She opened her eyes. "I think I forgot how to breathe." He lifted her gently. "You've been the voice of a revolution. It's okay to pause." She leaned into his chest. "I just don't want to lose the momentum." "You won't," he whispered, "but you will lose yourself if you don't rest." That weekend, they escaped to a small Hanok guest house in Jeonju. No Wi-Fi. Just paper walls, spring rain, and silence. Rachel slept for nearly 12 hours. When she woke, Jonathan was making tea in the courtyard. "You remember how to smile yet?" he asked. She nodded. Almost. But their peace was interrupted. An email from Weston and Knox. This time, not from Sterling, but from the board. An official offer. Co-directorship of the new global division, a budget, a team, and freedom. It was everything Rachel once wanted, and nothing she was sure she still needed. Jonathan read it in silence. "They're serious." Rachel sat beside him. "Feels like a test, or a trap, or maybe a mirror," he said, "to see who you are now." She looked at him. "And if I accept?" His jaw tightened. "Then I'll help you build whatever you choose, even if it's not with me." She stood abruptly. "Don't say that." "I have to," he said, voice calm, "because love can't be a leash, and ambition shouldn't be a threat." Rachel walked away, heart pounding. Was this what success cost? The very thing she fought to find, finally offered, might fracture the only thing she didn't want to lose. She called her mother that night, told her everything. Her mom listened quietly, then said, "If you go back, go because your soul wants it, not because your ego does." Rachel cried, "But how do I know the difference?" Her mother's voice was gentle. "The ego says, don't let them forget you. The soul says, build something they can never erase." She spent the next day in silence, watching the clouds roll over the Han River. By dusk, she had her answer. She found Jonathan on the roof of their building, hands in his pockets. He turned as she stepped forward. "I'm not going back," she said. "I thought you might. I don't want to be hired into a story I outgrew. I want to finish writing the one we started." Jonathan smiled. "So we build." She nodded. "From Seoul to Sao Paulo, from language to leadership." "And love?" he asked. She took his hand. "Love's already woven into every line." The next morning she sent her reply to Weston and Knox. "Thank you for your offer, but I've already accepted something bigger. My voice." 3 months after turning down Weston and Knox, Rachel stood in a sleek Sao Paulo boardroom, a map of South America behind her, and 2 languages flowing off her tongue like water. "Local culture is not an obstacle. It's a compass," she said in Portuguese, before switching to English. "And if we follow it, we'll unlock loyalty instead of just compliance." Her words landed. The Brazilian executives nodded, impressed, not just by her fluency, but by her authenticity. She wasn't a consultant parachuting in with imported ideas. She was a bridge, fluent not only in language, but in feeling. Jonathan watched from the back of the room, silent, proud. After the meeting, he pulled her into a quiet corner of the rooftop terrace. "You're still the most brilliant person in any room," she smiled, "and you're still the one who lets me speak without interruption." They kissed softly. Then she whispered, "We need to talk." He stiffened. About? The next step. We're expanding. Fast. Too fast. He shook his head. Not too fast, but we need structure, teams, delegation. Otherwise, we're just chasing scale instead of building legacy. Rachel exhaled. Then let's redesign our blueprint. They returned to Seoul to restructure Moore and Blake, hired regional directors, built a curriculum for internal cultural fluency, created satellite offices in Dubai, São Paulo, and Nairobi. Within months, they were not just global, they were sustainable, and their weekends, once swallowed by work, became sacred again. One weekend in Bali, during a rare 3-day break, Jonathan turned to Rachel as they watched the sun set over rice fields. "I have a question." She raised an eyebrow. "Yes?" He knelt, pulled out a simple gold band. "Rachel Moore, you taught me how to listen in languages I never knew existed. Will you marry me?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." They celebrated with coconut water and a dance in the rain, barefoot, both laughing like the world hadn't tried to break them before. And maybe it had, but they were whole anyway. Back in Seoul, the news spread. Their team cheered. Clients sent gifts from 5 continents. A Syrian diplomat even offered to officiate. But Rachel and Jonathan wanted something simpler. "A ceremony," she said, "but not a spectacle." He agreed. "Just us, and the people who walked this with us." They chose Lisbon, neutral ground, a city where cultures converged, and the sea met the sky like possibility. The ceremony was held in a stone courtyard surrounded by olive trees and old tile. Rachel wore a dress with lace from Morocco and embroidery from Korea. Jonathan wore no tie, just a smile that didn't fade. During the vows, Rachel said, "I once thought my voice had to be borrowed or disguised, but you reminded me that it could be trusted, that I could speak my truth and still be loved." Jonathan replied, "I once believed leadership meant standing alone, but you showed me that the real power is in partnership." They kissed as sunlight spilled between stone pillars and guests stood to applaud, not the performance, but the proof that ambition and affection could coexist, that love didn't have to silence purpose, and that 2 voices could sing louder when harmonized. As they danced under lanterns that night, Rachel whispered, "What if we're just getting started?" Jonathan held her close. "Then let's begin again, every day." 6 months after the wedding in Lisbon, Moore and Blake was featured on the cover of Global Strategy Quarterly. The headline read, "Language as Leverage, How 2 Outsiders Rewrote the Rules of International Business." The article praised their radical approach. Empathy as capital, culture as infrastructure, but not everyone celebrated their rise. In New York, at a sleek midtown building with a familiar logo, Sterling Hall reviewed a confidential dossier. Weston and Knox had launched a new division, Global Liaison Services, and its lead strategist, a young linguist, fresh from academia, packaged with precision and ambition. Her name, Ava Ryland. Rachel first heard about Ava through an article. The language felt eerily familiar, bridging cultures, redefining influence, decoding nuance. It was as if someone had cloned the Moore and Blake playbook and stripped it of its soul. "They're copying us," she said to Jonathan one night, laptop open. He read in silence, jaw tight. "Not just copying, they're weaponizing our work and turning empathy into performance." Rachel's voice was cold. "Then we do what we've always done. We tell the truth louder." They decided to respond not with lawyers, but with vision. They'd launch a global summit, the Fluent Future. Held in Marrakesh, the summit would bring together thinkers, translators, diplomats, cultural activists. Not for commerce, but for conversation, for building trust where translation alone failed. As the plans grew, invitations went out, and one landed on Ava Ryland's desk. To their surprise, she accepted. Rachel was stunned. "She's bold," Jonathan said. Or reckless. The night before the summit, they walked the market streets of Marrakesh, the air thick with spice and history. "What are you afraid of?" he asked. "That I'll see myself in her," Rachel admitted. The summit opened in a former riad converted into a cultural hall. Mosaic walls glistened. Sunlight bathed the room in warm hues. Rachel opened the event in Arabic. Jonathan followed in French, and then Ava Ryland took the stage, young, crisp, charismatic. "Language is not just sound," she said. "It's strategy." After her session, she approached Rachel privately. "I didn't steal your ideas," she said. "I studied them, admired them, but I thought they could be sharper." Rachel replied, "You made them slicker, not deeper." Ava didn't flinch. "Then show me deeper." Rachel invited her to a round table the next day. No script, no slides, just dialogue. There, with community leaders from Cameroon, Tokyo, and Istanbul, Ava watched as Rachel navigated silences, interruptions, cultural tension. And for the first time, Ava fell silent, not defeated, but thoughtful. That evening, she found Rachel on the rooftop. "You don't just speak languages, you listen in them." Rachel nodded. "And that's what you can't copy." Ava offered her hand. "I have a lot to learn." Rachel took it. "Then stop performing, start participating." As the summit ended, journalists asked Rachel what was next. She looked at Jonathan, then at the audience. "We don't want to grow to dominate. We want to grow to share, to mentor, to teach others how to listen before they lead." Jonathan added, "Fluency isn't just about words. It's about being present, being honest, and being willing to be wrong." Their words resonated across continents, and somewhere in New York, Sterling Hall sat alone in his office, watching the summit's live stream. His reflection flickered in the screen's glow as Rachel's voice echoed, "We're not afraid to be human in our leadership, and that's what makes us unforgettable." Autumn in Seoul arrived with a hush. Leaves flamed gold, the air crisp with something unspoken. Rachel sat alone in her office, rereading a letter she never mailed. It was addressed to her father, dead for over a decade. "I wish you'd lived to see this," she had written. "To see me speak, lead, be loved. You told me words would be my bridge. I only wish you could have walked across it with me." The letter fell from her hands as her assistant knocked. "There's someone here asking for you. Says he's your brother." Rachel's chest tightened. She hadn't spoken to Caleb in years, not since the funeral, not since he'd vanished into debt and defiance. She walked into the reception lounge, and there he was, gaunter, older, but still unmistakably him. "Hey, Rach," her voice faltered. "What are you doing here? I saw the TED Talk and then the summit. I figured it was time." She crossed her arms. "Time for what?" "To say I'm sorry. For disappearing. For never returning your calls. For making you carry everything." Rachel blinked rapidly. "You think a visit makes that okay?" Caleb nodded slowly. "No, but it makes it honest." They sat outside a cafe. He sipped his tea like it was penance. "I've got nothing," he said. "No job, no clean record, but I saw you and remembered the girl who used to read foreign newspapers just to feel like she belonged somewhere." Rachel stared at him. "That girl built an empire. Without you." "I know," he whispered. "That's why I came. Not for money, for permission." She narrowed her eyes. "Permission?" "To try again, to start something small, to remember that I'm still your brother." "That night," she told Jonathan. He listened without interrupting, then asked, "Do you want him in your life again?" She was silent. Then, "I want to want him, but I don't trust the want yet." Jonathan nodded. "Then let him prove it, just like you had to." Over the next few weeks, Caleb lingered, not asking for favors, just helping. volunteering with refugee youth, offering translations when he could. Slowly, Rachel began to see shadows of the brother she once adored. She invited him to a team dinner, informal, warm. He surprised everyone with his sincerity. Even the interns liked him. Later that night, Rachel asked him, "Why now?" He replied, "Because your success reminded me what survival could become if I stopped blaming the world." She believed him, tentatively. Trust, she knew, didn't regenerate easily, but it did breathe if given room. One evening, Rachel found another letter on her desk, handwritten, from Caleb. "You were always the bridge. I was too busy trying to set fire to the shore. Thank you for not letting the water swallow me." Rachel folded the letter slowly. The ache in her chest wasn't pain, it was release, a letting go of the narrative that she had to succeed alone, that love was a liability, that past meant permanence. She walked into the living room where Jonathan sat reading. Without a word, she climbed into his lap, curling into him like a promise. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she whispered. "For the first time, I think I actually am." 1 year later, Moore and Blake Global Strategy had become more than a consultancy. It was a movement, with regional offices on 4 continents, an academy for cross-cultural leaders, and a mentorship pipeline for young linguists from marginalized communities. Rachel's vision had turned into an institution. But success, she knew, wasn't measured in expansion. It was felt in the quiet moments, like when a young girl in Lagos sent a handwritten letter saying, "I didn't think someone like me could belong in boardrooms until I saw you." Or when a translator in Mumbai cried after being promoted, to director saying, "You taught me that interpreting wasn't just a skill, it was a power." Rachel read these stories often, especially on days when fatigue whispered, "This is too much." She'd sit in the soul garden courtyard Jonathan built for her, watching the wind move through the bamboo, and remind herself that movements don't rest, but they do root. One morning, as winter gave way to spring, Jonathan handed her a ticket envelope. "You're delivering the commencement address at Harvard," she blinked. "That's where I dropped out." He smiled. "And now you'll walk back through the gates, this time with everyone listening." On the day of the speech, Rachel stood behind the podium, wearing a simple navy suit. She didn't speak as a celebrity. She spoke as a survivor. "I never finished my degree," she began, "but I never stopped learning, because life taught me where academia left off." She paused. "The lesson, language is not just about fluency, it's about permission, to speak, to be heard, and most of all, to exist fully, even when the room wasn't built for you." Her voice grew stronger. "So to every student here who feels unseen, I say, don't shrink, don't wait to be invited. Translate your silence into strategy." After the ceremony, she stood alone by the Charles River, watching the water. Jonathan joined her, his arms slipping around her waist. "You came full circle," he said. "No," she replied. "I created a new one." He kissed her temple. "What's next?" She smiled. "Legacy, but not mine. Theirs." That summer, Rachel and Jonathan launched the Listening Project, a global archive of untold stories from interpreters, frontline workers, and community builders. Not in English alone, but in every language that carried emotion across borders. Their first exhibit opened in Cape Town. Then it traveled to Cairo, then Copenhagen. And one evening, as they walked through the Seoul office for the last time before transitioning to advisory roles, Rachel stopped at the entry wall. There, etched in bronze, was their mission, to make language not just a tool, but a truth. She traced the words, then turned to Jonathan. "We didn't just build a company," she said. "We translated a generation's potential." He took her hand. "And we didn't do it by shouting louder. We did it by listening harder." They left the building quietly, No fanfare. Just two people who had found each other through chaos, trusted the quiet, and wrote a new grammar for what leadership, what love could mean. The streets of Seoul glimmered beneath them, alive with voices, and for the first time in a long time, Rachel didn't feel like she needed to be heard. She just needed to be present, because the world was finally speaking back. In a language, she helped teach it how to feel. Wow, what a story, right? I'd love to hear what you thought. Drop a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tell me where you're watching from. And hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out the other stories we have on the channel. There's so much more waiting for you.